In a time of rising unrest, when borders dominate headlines and immigration policy shapes the future of our nation, the truth matters. From the front lines of law enforcement, national security, and public policy, this is Frontline Facts, where rhetoric is stripped away, where politics takes a back seat, and where facts, hard, documented facts, lead the conversation. As instability grows beyond our southern border, as communities feel the impact at home, we bring you informed voices. Attorneys, senior law enforcement leaders, policy experts, and professionals who understand the law, the protocols, and the consequences. This isn't opinion. This isn't spin. This is clarity in a time of confusion. This is Frontline Facts, and the conversation starts now.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Louisa Deason, and I am the host of Frontline Facts, where we are correcting the rhetoric. Today is a special show. We have a very, very important guest. Her name is Polly Luper, and she is not only an incredible and amazing human being, but she has come with a incredible background and is running for the Republican Party for State of Representatives District 126. So I want to introduce everyone to Polly Luper, and good morning, Polly. How are you?
Doing great. Hanging in there, making it all happen.
Well, you've got quite an impressive background. And of course, you and I kind of are probably kindred spirits. I've worked ICE and you work law enforcement. And so I want to kind of set the tone so that people understand what is your background? What have you been doing? What are you doing now? And then, what caused you or what made you or rattled your cage enough to want to run for candidate?
Absolutely. So, my story leading into law enforcement is a little bit sad, but I think that it's an important one to tell. So I was 10 years old when my stepsister, unfortunately, was murdered in her home with her biological mother. They were both killed. And at the age of 10, myself and my family members were thrust into the criminal justice system. And unwillingly, we didn't ask to be part of that club. So I was affected greatly by that. I saw the effect that it had on my family. And about 7 years later, I applied to be a 911 dispatcher in my hometown, and I tested for it. And I had tested apparently the highest that anybody had tested. So
Wow.
They were like, well, we have to hire you.
Well, and I'm sorry about your family. That's a tragic story.
Yes, it's it speaks to the long ripple effect that crime has on individuals and on families, and the generational effect that it has that often goes untalked about. My sister is forever 18. She didn't get married. She didn't get to have babies. She didn't get to graduate from college or any of the things that we did because of somebody else who chose to be violent. And it was a very horrific crime, very, very, very brutal. And every 7 years, my family relives it when we head to a parole hearing and have to listen to all the details of the crime and testify to the parole board of why that person should not be set free and the danger that they are to society. And it has a great effect and a profound effect. And so I set out to really, hopefully change the direction and the trajectory for other victims. And if nothing else, be a voice that could say, I understand and really, truly understand what they were going through on a very visceral level, honestly. So, so that got me into law enforcement. Was a dispatcher. I worked as a parking enforcement officer. I was well loved. I'm just kidding.
That's like working internal affairs. Nobody likes you. I did, but your friends go away.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I eventually did that too. Yeah, I was well versed in washing the holler out of my uniform, if you will. So they were $5 tickets. Yeah, it was kind of ridiculous. So, but it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot that even fast forward to some of the things that we're seeing now that the attacks on law enforcement are often related to the uniform and the authority and what that represents versus the actual person. But the sad part is there is a person behind that has to go home every day and face the family and, and deal with things. So, but yeah, I moved on to become a patrol officer and then worked as an internal investigator for an Indian tribe in northern Wisconsin and did large scale fraud and money laundering investigations there.
Say, right? Don't mess with the Indians.
Yes. No, I'll tell you what, I was so blessed. It is interesting because it does come up in my campaign, especially with gaming right now being a hot topic in Texas. I think I'm one of few that can talk about it. Actually, I know I'm the only one in my race that has that anywhere close to that background. But I was very lucky. I worked for a tribe that had it together and ran a very successful business and took care of their family, both, whether you were tribal or not. The employees were treated very, very well there. And it was great, and found my way down to Texas, met a Texas boy, and he won my heart. So, he happens to be.
Well, I met your husband. I think he's an outstanding member of the Texas community. So I'll tell you, and your son, I just love your son. He goes everywhere with you and helps you on your campaign. I just think that's adorable.
Yes, he's the best thing I ever did. So I've got a lot of, things hanging on my wall and all those things. But he's by far, I'm a very proud mom. He's well beyond his years, and he has been out. I mean, we're out at the polls every day, all day long, and he has not complained. He's been engaged. He talks to people. And it is just, sometimes you wonder if what you're doing is right as a parent, for sure. But then
doing it right, Holly.
Thank you.
Well, listen, let's dive into the public safety aspect. You touched briefly on that. And of course, with your history and your background and the tragedy your family's had to live through, I think, both of us share I don't share that, unfortunately, but, and I don't wish that on anybody. So for that, I'm very sorry about your family, but public safety is critical, and what they've done, what the left has done, and what people think of law enforcement today, and the lack of respect and the lack of their following authority. And I look at ICE agents in Minnesota, for example, and I mean, I have tons of friends that work for the service, and I certainly am former ICE, and my husband retired after 30 years. And it just, you watch them get spit on and bricks thrown at them and shot at, and, just the rhetoric and the violence and just everything. And there has to be a really, really big change to the way that we treat them, the way that we see them, and they have authority. It's just a mess. I mean, talk about your public safety stance that you've really been passionate about while running for this candidate position in District 126.
Yes. So there's no room for the amount of disrespect, and it absolutely disgusts me to see what's happening in Minneapolis. And it is a direct reflection of we've taken faith out of everything. You can't talk about it, you're judged, and this and that and the other thing. But there also hasn't been any little resistance coming from authorities in office and saying, no, we're not going to do this. And I'll give you an example, even just out at the polls, this has happened. There's some people that came by and started screaming that we were pedophiles and yelled that at my 13-year-old son who was standing there. And these are middle-aged people that should be more emotionally mature enough to handle their mouth, and unfortunately are not. Yeah, it really is. I mean, because I sat there for a second. It took me just a split second because my son looked at me and he said, "What does that mean?" I said, "I'll tell you later." And he actually told people later, he said, "When my mom said, 'I'll tell you later,' I knew it was really bad." We're very open. I want him to see the world for what it is so he can react appropriately to it as well. And boy, I did. I said, "Yeah, I'll tell you later." And I did. And we had a long conversation about it and why it was inappropriate. And I paused for a second and I was like, you feel like you're not supposed to say anything back. But here's the reality. you make very little money as a state legislator. Our family will lose money by me doing this position. And I chimed up and I said, you know what? I've actually put those people in prison. So you're welcome. And I'm glad that you can sleep safe tonight. And the guy turned around
And that's exactly
Yes.
what it takes, is
You know?
that kind of a stance.
Yes, because it is absolutely inappropriate. You can have whatever opinion you want, and it can be convoluted, it can be misguided, it can be whatever it is. You have every right to do that. But what you don't have a right to do is to come into other people's face and say things like that, particularly to kids, because I draw a very hard line.
You know.
Yes, that is. And I've worked with trafficking victims, and in pedophile victims, I've interviewed the victims, and to say that so casually, there's something fundamentally flawed in that human being.
Well, there's some mental health issues certainly going on. Major. I kids grew up in a law enforcement family, and I could tell you one thing. I remember somebody asking my son, "What would you do in this situation?" He goes, "I think I'd rather go to jail. I'm afraid of my mom."
Yes. It's funny. Son says the same thing. Yes.
Well, they just grew up knowing better. And, the thing that's scary is not only the lack of respect, but I mean, the trafficking of children in this country. I understand it's not just a global issue. It's also, Texas has a huge problem with just the domestic aspect of trafficking. Women and children and boys. And, people think it'll never happen to me. And that's just so wrong. You have to literally keep your head on a swivel. And you, of all people, would know this, being in law enforcement and with the work that you do.
Yes. I actually worked a case in my private practice with a young girl, 22 years old. And it happened exactly textbook how she, a guy kind of wooed her at the bar. He was good looking. He had good cologne. He had the watch. He had the car. He had all the things. And textbook almost to the minute of how she was swept away. The phone is broken. Oh, I'm sorry. I dropped your phone. I'll get you a new one. And all of a sudden she has no contact with family. And the challenge that we face with those types of cases, luckily, her dad did not give up, and her dad tracked her down and was able to bring her home. But the challenge that we face, and that was a year ago, so this isn't like this is old news. This is happening every single day. And the challenge with that case is with law enforcement, because she's an adult, it's always, she's an adult, she can go, so she can leave if she wants to. And, what markers are there and what can we do as community members to tighten up policy so that when somebody says, no, this is unusual behavior, or this happened, or, whatever those, catalysts may be, to do that so we can protect our children. We've got World Cup coming here to Houston, and, Trump announced that there's going to be, the potential because of Mexico that more games may be coming here, and they may be moving that here. That's a world stage, and that is a massive, this better than anybody, the opportunity for the movement. I was very frustrated with the with the Super Bowl for a number of reasons, but one of them being that, in San Francisco, they have effectively defunded all of their law enforcement, and then they have a Super Bowl. And
and the amount of women that are trafficked to those events, people don't realize that. It's like, open up your eyes. This is happening in your backyard.
Literally, all the Airbnbs. People ask me, like, well, we don't want Airbnbs in your neighborhood. And I said, you shouldn't have them. And they said, why? I said, not because they might play loud noise or, have music or parties or whatever else. I said, but because they can use them to move people.
Yeah. They're drawn houses is what they are. They're slash houses.
Yep. And for human beings, we see it for packages. You see these videos, things like that. And people go, well, I don't know what that is. And I'm like, oh, you have to please educate yourself, And so it is frustrating, part of me running is wanting to get different legislation passed for making sure that rental car facilities, and rental truck facilities are e-verifying their drivers. So they can't move.
And you know what? You said it. E-Verify is so important. That was created after 9/11. I was instrumental in going out and teaching people about that program. Verify. The employer doesn't have to have all the ability to determine whether somebody is eligible to work, but they could get those documents necessary to prove that that person is eligible. And then, of course, the E-Verify goes directly to the government entity that does all that.
Yep. And using it and mandating that service be used for these channels, for the channels for criminal drivers is really what it is. And to be able to close those channels effectively, we see it in our community, and that was a big part of what made me want to run was I was not getting the help from the legislators that were sitting in office. And there's a lot of cronyism. There's a lot of, positions being passed down and, things like that. And sometimes that can be good because somebody could have a learning curve and come up through that. And it's not always bad. But when you have people who are addressing, it's very difficult. It's very difficult for me to sit and watch people say, well, I'm all for law enforcement and safety and security. And then I ask them, what have you done? And it's, oh, well, I support law enforcement. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. They don't see it the way you and I see it.
Exactly. I'm like, are you actually the one standing up telling people not to say these things? Are you walking through the homeless encampments? Are you actually working with the other entities in your community, with all of them to, bring them all to the table? And I am doing those things. And so it's very personal because safety and security, we know if people are not safe in their communities, they either flee or the community ceased to be what it once was. And, and then the 5% gets to take over. And I refuse to let it happen in my community. So,
well, and another example is, the ensuing argument that stands with, there's many states that do not honor ICE detainers. And of course, Governor Abbott has made that a mandate in this state. And of course, legislation, it's supposed to be all compliant with all the sheriff's departments. But, I believe that all law enforcement should cooperate because the way that we see it is you have somebody who is a criminal illegal alien coming into the jail system while they're in the intake process. And if you had ICE agents at that jail doing their job and looking at what the person through the databases that they have, obviously, determining whether this individual poses a risk if released. And of course, we have liberal judges that are bonding these people out and they're going back out to the communities, which poses a significant risk if the ICE detainers aren't honored. And now you have this person being out on bond, back out into the communities where they can pose a significant threat, not just the communities, but the officers. And then, of course, you're talking a lot of times it starts out as a domestic violence dispute and then it just escalates from there.
Yes. And then we have re-victimization.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And I believe, don't quote me on this. I'm sure somebody will try to do it, but I believe that there was over 300, it was between 300 and 400 cases. And I believe it was upwards of 350 cases in Harris County that the offenders were let out on PR bonds or $100 bonds and recommitted violent crimes, including homicides. And so when you look at the recidivism rate, it's not recidivism after they go to prison and they don't know how to act when they come out, because I actually think we're doing a decent job on that end. It's the people who haven't been sent to prison yet for their crimes. And again, if there's no resistance, yeah.
You're right. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to move forward to some other of the issues that you're very, very passionate about. And let's talk a little bit about the sanctity of life. Describe that and what your platform, where you stand on that. Describe to our audience exactly what your stance is on that and why you're so passionate about that.
Yeah. So I'm definitely a little bit further on those views than a lot of people. And people get uncomfortable when I talk about it sometimes. But we're going to talk. I'm very good at talking about things that are uncomfortable my whole career. It's odd.
I think that's where you and I get along very well.
I actually signed the Abolish Abortion Pledge and went as far as believing that should be something that we should not be allowing at all. And the reason behind it is I was not, to be fair, I was not always against abortion. I was young and stupid once and made a lot of poor decisions, as a lot of us do. But I also, grew up in a time where I thought, well, it's not really my position. That's somebody else's, option to think about those things and do those things. And as I got older And, it particularly, I was told I was not going to be able to have children. And so I thought, well, who am I to say, whatever. And by the grace of God, we were gifted with our son, and it literally was an absolute blessing. And I speak about God quite a bit, but this really was a God moment. It was after my husband and I had traveled to testify at my sister's parole hearing, and we came home, and life kind of went on for a month or two, and I'd gone to the doctor. They said, "Oh, you're not here, a referral for in vitro or whatever else." And I had to tell my husband, who wanted to be nothing more than a dad his entire life, that I really thought, I don't think this is going to happen. And we had a baby. We got pregnant. We had a baby. And I will tell you, very early on, I felt him, and everything I knew about life and thought I knew. There we go. Let's caveat that. Everything I thought I knew about life changed in that moment. And I could no longer understand how someone could feel a human life and not think, oh, this is an absolute gift from God. And so you kind of fast forward, and my views, you go through motherhood, which motherhood absolutely surprised me in so many amazing ways. It changed me. Fast forward, I went through another parole hearing this summer, actually, and I was questioned with this by a friend. She said, well, long before I was running, I was not planning on running any of that. When let's back up a little bit. My son was born, and my sister's name was Tracy, and my son's name is Trace. So he is named after her, and it was an absolute God wink, and believe that she certainly played a part in giving me that, and giving my husband and I that gift. So my friend questioned me while we were traveling. She came with me to the hearing. My husband had to work. He couldn't come. He couldn't travel at that point. So she came with me. We were having this conversation about it, and she said, well, how do you feel about it? And I said, it's interesting, because I'm sitting here defending, hearing that people get defended at these parole hearings. And there were people defending the criminals to let them out at this hearing too, right? You hear all the cases.
Oh, yes.
And I really had a reckoning in that moment. And I looked at her and I said, I can't defend that at all. I said, because I'm sitting here, and criminals who make the choice to be a criminal, they're making the choice. They have a million different moments in their day that they could have changed their path, and they don't. And they choose to be a criminal on whatever crime that is, right? And that was kind of it for me. And so the campaign started, and I was approached by different entities, and this group reached out to me. We had a long conversation about it. And I said, you know what? I can't not defend that. I can't. And so that was kind of, my stance became a lot more steeled as I moved forward, because I was like, nobody's defending these babies. And they didn't commit a crime. They're a literal gift from God, and they did not commit a crime. And I can't defend not standing up for their right to be here. And so I ask people, I'm like, listen, if if you're in that place and you feel like that's where you needed to be, or you need to make a choice to terminate that pregnancy, I'm going to ask you to wait 9 months and give that baby to somebody, because we were also foster parents in our family. And so I know that there are families waiting for those babies, and they may change their mind.
Yeah.
Pregnancy may change their mind. And you see these walk away stories, and you see these stories. I have goosebumps right now, because God's telling me this is I'm supposed to be talking.
Give me goosebumps.
So, it is really, it's something. And I think that I have a strong stance on it, and people don't have to agree with me, and that's okay. But I ask them to think about it, and literally just ask Jesus what he wants you to feel about that, and he'll tell you.
And that's a good stance to have. I want to move on a little bit farther to give you plenty of time, but you know what? We're at that halfway point now. So what we're going to do is take a commercial break, and we will be right back. Listen, we're going to have to cut over to a commercial break real quick, because we do have sponsors we want to highlight. Thank you for waiting.
In a market as dynamic and data-driven as Houston, experience isn't optional, it's essential. I'm Rena Seidel, team lead at Wasdale Properties with over 20 years of strategic real estate experience in the Houston market. I work with physicians, executives, investors, and international clients who expect precision, discretion, and results. Fluent in both English and Spanish, I navigate complex negotiations seamlessly, whether it's luxury, residential, relocation, or investment portfolios. My expertise in Houston investment landscape allows my clients to make confident, numbers-backed decisions in one of the strongest markets in the country. If you're looking for insight, not guesswork, call me directly at 832-274-8884. Rena Seidel, Strategic Real Estate Results.
This episode of Frontline Facts with Louisa Deason is brought to you by Trace Investigations. When the truth matters, experience matters. Trace Investigations specializes in missing persons cases, cold cases, family court matters, complex fraud investigations, and professional process serving. Whether you're navigating a sensitive custody dispute, seeking answers in a long-standing case, or uncovering financial deception, they approach every investigation with precision, discretion, and professionalism. Their team brings over 30 years of combined experience, with a keen attention to detail and integrity at every level of the investigative process. No shortcuts, no guesswork, just facts. Consultations are always free. Call them today or save their information for when you need it at 920-858-5931 or email traceinvestigationstx@gmail.com. Trace Investigations, because the truth is worth finding.
Well, we are back. I am Louisa Deason. I am your host for Frontline Facts. We are correcting the rhetoric, and we're coming back to our guest today. Polly, let's go ahead and start talking about some of the things that you, as you go out and campaign, what are some of the things that are coming up? What are you being asked things about? And let's talk about the 2A, the Second Amendment right. I mean, you're former law enforcement. You've seen just about everything. What is your stance politically as you campaign on those issues?
Yeah, so it's a constitutional right. And so it's an and it's an interesting argument that people bring to the table when they are they want to say, oh, well, you can't do this or you can't do that. And I'm like, well, the beauty of it is it's a constitutional right. So despite what feelings you may have about it, I'm of the belief that, do guns need to be kept out of children's hands? Absolutely. It's same with, we had a whole campaign in the 80s that we probably need to bring back, but the Mr. Yuck stickers, right? Poisons also need to be kept out of children's hands. But to the regard that we need to be limiting firearms, I believe that when we look at 2A, it's not a gun issue. It's a people issue. It is a mental health issue. And, you look at other countries that have, they don't have any guns and there's people running around with machetes. And those cases are well documented. And so if people have the desire, they'll find the means. So, I talked earlier about my sister's murder. There were no firearms used. It was a cooking pan and a lamp and a 5-pound weight. So it wasn't a firearm. So, yeah.
Right. The violence. It was a propensity for the violence.
Yeah,
exactly. That's a big issue.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, yeah. So I think that it's an interesting thing. I tend to try to not argue with people about it because I just say, well, it's a constitutional right. And if you want to go get an amendment for that, have at her.
Well, and I see it from the perspective of federal. It is against the law to carry a weapon or be in possession of a weapon or have weapons in your house if you're here illegally. It is a felony, and it sure counts against you when you're in immigration court with your civil cases, but by all means, yes, I agree with that.
Yes.
We're fortunate being a state where, we can open carry or we can carry, period.
Right. And I should caveat all of that goes to you can't be a criminal.
Right.
Yes.
Proper checks, actually good, stuff like that,
Yeah.
Let's dive into your fiscal responsibility. I know that you are absolutely passionate about that. We see government overreach, whether it's local, state, or federal, every day. And the thing that is scary to me is, we have to talk about term limits. And so let's talk a little bit about what your stance is on your fiscal responsibility.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. When I started my campaign, that was one of the big points for me. Because as a fraud investigator, follow the money is a big deal to me. And money is often, 7 deadly sins, right? So, the root of all evil, and many times you can trace it back to a lot of the problems that we have in our society. We need it. It's necessary. But even running my campaign, I actually, it was very interesting. You are told you have to do this and you have to do that and you have to interview with this and that and whatever. So I was doing all of it and none of it was feeling right. And I go back to the fact that I wanted my campaign to represent House District 126 in North Harris County. And I wanted it to be funded by House District 126 in Harris County. Because I believe that when you're working for the people who are literally emptying out a bank account for you, for your campaign, you will never work harder than you will when you know where it's coming from. And fundamentally, I believe that if more candidates were taking a stance, and it doesn't take a lot of us, but it takes some of us to start the trend. And I've pushed back heavily on my opponents on that because they've got all the PAC money, they've got the lobbyist money, and they're fighting in your mailbox every single day. And when I'm out at the polls, people are like, "Oh, I've seen some of your signs, I've seen this, but I don't get anything in the mail from you." And I said, "No, you won't. I don't think that works, and I don't think that that's the right way to spend money. But it's easy to spend the money when it's not yours, and it's easy to, lack of a better term, get in bed with lobbyists when they want something from you and they're going to dangle this carrot of money in front of you. And I just think it's wrong. I think it does an absolute disservice to our communities. And my stance on my campaign has been, if I can't be fiscally responsible running a campaign, how am I going to do that fighting for you in Austin? And people, they get bought, sold, and traded, and it happens all the time. We see candidates, their personalities change. They're no longer available to the public.
Met a few of those.
Yeah, I'm sure I helped a few of those. Yeah. And it's tough. It's tough because it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of effort on my part, to do all of it without, and it would be easier. It would be 100% easier if I had more funds to do things, but it's not right. And I think it's a very slippery slope leading to a dark negative place that, I again, law enforcement, we couldn't accept free coffee. It was like,
well, and that should, obviously, I remember working for the federal government. You couldn't go out to lunch and have somebody pay your bill that was over $20. It's common sense. And I think what's left the party is common sense. And we see that every day on the news, including them who've lost some of their minds. But, fiscal responsibility goes a long way. Taxpayers are tired of footing the bill. I know that when we had all the problems with the previous administration and open border policies and catch and release, that it cost Texas taxpayers well over about $50 million a year just to sustain the illegal immigration. And people don't they don't wrap their head around that.
Well, it doesn't look
everything. The schools being overpopulated, it affects what we pay. And this was during a time where we're all sitting here wondering how we're going to get out and work if we're not essential workers, et cetera, et cetera. And I know a lot of people will say, well, you can't focus on that anymore because we're back to normal. No, we're really not.
We're not. No, we're not. No,
really not.
And to that point, we're watching things in Houston where, we have to close these schools because, the enrollment has dropped. And I laugh every time somebody says it. I'm like, oh, that's weird. What? Who left? Oh, well, people are homeschooling. No, they're not. 10% of the population is going to homeschool, and we homeschool. But it's not that big of a number. I said no. I said check again. I go ask who's leaving. Go see where those numbers are, and it's people that are self-deporting, that are being deported. And the reality is, the 10% that homeschools, there's a number of issues, but the 10% of people that may homeschool are opting to because, my son shouldn't have to sit in a classroom that is all in Spanish when we're paying the taxes for it. We're paying the property taxes for it. And it doesn't make sense. And not that people can't come here, but again, you've got a legal path to coming here. And a lot of people have had I had actually had a girl from Venezuela approach me at the polls, and she had a lot to say about this. And it was a fascinating conversation because she said, I've been here for 20 years. She said, the first thing I did was get my papers, the very first thing. And she goes, and I don't know why people don't do it. She said, and now they're surprised that they're having to do it. And she goes, but it was a crime to come here and not do it. And I was like, can you record that for me?
Yeah,
like exactly. That's the statement, that we need. And the reality is that the open border policy, there's a long-term effect to that beyond just what we've discussed. We've got terrorism. We've got countries who are pouring their terrorists into this country left and right and have been doing so for decades while we were taught to be tolerant. And one of the things I teach my son is I said, tolerance breeds ignorance. And if you look the other way, you're complicit. And we had a massive amount of complicity in our communities because we're supposed to just, you're our neighbors and we're supposed to be nice. And there's a time to not be nice.
Well, and it's almost as if we didn't learn anything after 9/11. Lessons weren't learned. I can remember working for the service, and people would say, well, y'all are out just being really callous and you're profiling and you're doing this and you're doing that. I'm like, profiling is illegal, but if you follow the pattern of behavior, it'll lead you to the crime and all the money as well. Yeah. And the thing is, it's almost as if we've just gotten complacent about not wanting to hurt people's feelings instead of really speaking out and defending our citizens and our state.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And really, what people don't realize is that it is a huge threat. Sharia law is not conducive to Western civilization, and we have to continue to fight. I believe we have the second largest Muslim population. I know a lot of Muslims that are very nice individuals that are very, productive and have, companies and do a lot for their own communities. And I have full respect for them. But the one that wants to come in and change the way that our religion is viewed and the way that women are viewed and everything else, that to me is just, you've got to go.
Right. Well, when we correct the rhetoric, when we look at people that are, they come here and they want to defend and protest everything that's going on, and then they want women's rights. Or they say, people are taking away women's rights, blah, blah, blah. And then they want to support a terrorist group that is all about taking away women's rights. And the juxtaposition is, it's mind-boggling because it's very hard to wrap my brain around. Sometimes I'm like, wait a second, you want this, but then you're going to support this, but you're not okay with this. And it doesn't make a lot of sense there. And you're absolutely right. The fact that, we have to defend our country, and we have to defend what it's based on. And the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is where it starts. And we have a lot of, if people were coming here and getting their citizenship, they would be educated on that. But even in our schools, they're not teaching it. And there's adults who don't know, different things. And it's interesting on the campaign trail, some of the things they say to you and the questions that they ask, you don't want to make anybody feel dumb, but you kind of go, how do you not know that?
I'd have a hard time biting my tongue.
I do too. I'm like, and so then I also have a hard time controlling my face. I'm like, oh, how do you not know, that this is, because you'll hear people say, even like a state legislator, they're just like, oh, and I will never turn away somebody that's like, well, I don't understand this, and they're genuinely coming to ask a question. But sometimes the challenge is getting to people to, and that's one of my passions and the projects that I work on in my area is to educate the public on where to go for what. Because oftentimes they're like, oh, well, they think the police can do something, and that's not really a police, maybe a police matter. Or they think,
Exactly.
yes, they have no idea of the levels of government. It's funny. I actually wear I have a pin, the Schoolhouse Rock, that I'm just a bill, and I wear the pin every election I've ever worked as a judge. I've been wearing it out at the polling place every day, and I've only had 2 people comment on it, and I'm devastated by that because I'm like, oh, like we need to re-educate,
Right. I mean, I remember watching that show.
Yes, and we sing it all the time. You're like, but it's kind of trite and cute and whatever. Actually, my pumpkin for Halloween, I had a white pumpkin, and I made him Bill, and I was like, oh, okay, we'll make this Bill, and but to help people understand, how this works, because that's another kind of bone I had to pick with the legislator is that we have come to a place in our campaigns and with our public officials, we reward we say we want fiscal responsibility, but then we base a successful campaign on how much money is driven into it. So,
well, and where's the money coming from? You talk to several people that say, well, you don't want it to be dark money. You got to know who's donating it and what country it's coming from. That to me is ridiculous that we have to even think about that or say something to somebody else.
But people don't know. And we have PACs that are donating for certain, gaming, what have you, that the money is coming from questionable places and questionable countries. And, it is very difficult to expose that. You put yourself at risk, you put your family at risk, all of those things. But it's fascinating when we've got the money side of things. And then the other challenge that we have is we see people, you'll get a legislator like, well, I filed, 200 bills or I co-authored 100 bills. And that's not the statistic I want. I want to know how many bills you've amended.
Right.
We have all these.
I've been very involved in the past with writing, recommendations or responses to make amendments to present as delegates in the Republican Party. But, people, I think the problem that we see today is people have gotten so frustrated with the system and how it works that they just don't get out and vote. And I have to stress how important it is that they need to educate themselves about the candidates that are running. They need to get out there, meet them, and they need to get out and vote because the criticalness of getting out to vote starts at your local levels.
Yes.
You can't make the changes at other levels unless you're voting the right way at the local level.
Yes, absolutely. I preach that more often than not when people come and complain to me about various things. The first thing I say is, do you go to your HOA meetings? Why would I go to that? Because that's where it starts.
They don't want me at mine.
Yep. They don't want me at mine either. My husband's on the board. I was on mine for 8 years, and then I'm on my mud board, and but those are the things you do. You get involved, and once you learn how it works, and all of a sudden your eyes are open to where you can affect the most positive change and where you can get things done. And I encourage people to do that all the time. I'm like, get involved in local boards. Wherever you can, so you understand, just how it works. And I think part of it is, I'm not going to blame schools for everything, but we took away debate teams, we took away extracurriculars, we took away music and art, and all of those were also ancillary pipelines to people being involved in their communities on different levels.
Well, and further than that, educationally wise, just making sure that we're creating kids that are creative, that they're self-thinkers. They know where to access. And I can't tell you how many times somebody will come in and ask me a question. I go, did you try to Google that?
Yeah.
Or did you do some research on that before you called me?
Yes. Is your Google?
They get offended, but I'm like, I'm not your Ask Jeeves, or I'm not your, I'm not the person that you need to be asking these questions to. I'm not going to tell you how to vote. I'll make my recommendations, but you all have to be independent thinkers and get out and meet the candidates.
Yes. That's been an interesting thing too. we've had people yell at us that there's too many candidates out at the polls, or there's too many people out there trying to talk to them. And I just laugh every time somebody says that. People that complain that you don't get to meet your candidates, and now they're out here in front of you and you don't want to meet them either. So which is it? Where are you in this?
You're never going to make everybody happy at the same time.
No, I stopped trying a long time ago. I was like,
well, it really totally is common sense. But, the fact that we're in a state that is critical. I mean, if we don't get out and vote accordingly, what's going to happen is that we may lose our state. And if our state goes, the rest of the country goes. And those are the statistics and the facts that, people are unaware of because they don't want to get out. And I don't know what else to say to people. It's not even lazy. I think that they just don't want to get out because they're so confused with the rhetoric today. And this is why we've launched this podcast and invited people like yourself who are candidates that really have a real passion for making a change, because they need to listen to other sources of information.
Yes. Well, it's interesting, and I'll tell a story because she said I could share it, but my mother's a lifelong Democrat, and it hurts to say that. That was and I grew up in the birthplace of the Republican Party. So I was, had this unique upbringing. But I guess we would talk about things that were going on and things like that, but we didn't really talk politics until later in life. Interestingly enough, about a year ago, I asked my mom, I said, Mom, I couldn't even talk to her. We couldn't even have conversations about everyday things. And it was a problem because I helped care for her. And I was like, Mom, we can't keep doing this. We've got to figure out something here. And I said, can you please do me a favor? And she's like, sure, And I said, can you just turn off the TV? That's all I'm asking you. I'm not asking you to change your mind. I'm not asking you to do anything else. I'm just asking you to turn off the TV. You can watch, she calls them her murder shows, her blood shows.
48 hours.
Murder mysteries, right? Yeah. She somehow thinks I can do my job in an hour thanks to Special Victims Unit. But she said, okay, I said, watch your shows, but just turn that stuff off. And Louise said the difference in my mother in the last year has been night and day. And not because because I didn't decide to run until September. So this was, a while ago that she was already kind of going through this. And it has been night and day. It has been absolute night and day. And she did vote Republican for the first time in her life, in a primary forever for me, of course. I mean, you hope your mom would vote for you. But it was funny because she told me, she said that was one of the neatest things she's like, I have to admit, to see your name.
Better late than never, right?
Yes, because it says your name and it says Republican right underneath it, and she's got to do that. But it really had an impact. So dare I say it's almost programming of people that you're watching, watching.
It's a brainwash is what it is.
Yes.
My mom watches Joy Behar. Like, that was the worst show to watch. Yes. Political stance. I mean, those women have no idea what they're talking about. And I just think that's not the most reliable source for political campaign information. But, I'm not going to change my mother's mind either. So, but with some of the final thoughts, we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to kind of pick your brain and say, okay, when people want to find out more about you and want to donate to your campaign, I know that we're, very close to March 3rd, but still we're making that push anyway to help you. And where do people need to go? What do they need to do? What can you recommend? What are some of your last thoughts, maybe comments that you want to add to the podcast?
Yeah. I think the main thing to, get across to the voting public is take every chance that you can to actually meet and engage with your candidate. You're not going to like everything about everyone. And I think that is also kind of a problem that we've run into is we put people up on a pedestal and then we try to pick them apart. And we see that a lot in our party. And I wish people would step back from that and say, okay, and I'll do the old Reagan, if you're with me 80%, I'll take 60 at this point because that gives me 40% that I can work on you with. And we can find a middle ground to what you need, because at the end of the day, whoever gets elected for these House districts, you're obligated to represent all of, I think it's almost 220,000 people in my district. That's a lot of people to represent. And I want to do my best. And in order to do that, I do have to make myself accessible to you and open to conversations that are difficult or challenging, and open to educating people. And I take that very seriously. So I encourage people to come out today and tomorrow. I'll be at the Bush Center early voting. For early voting yet. Election day, I will be everywhere. But you can find me at pollyluperfortexas.com. It's all spelled out. You can also reach me. I give out my phone number, 281-755-7104.
Can you repeat your number one more time for the audience?
Sure. 281-755-7104. And I take pride in reaching back out to people. You can reach, if you go to my website, you can get my email and reach me there. I do my best to respond. It's just my family and we do have a lot of volunteer people, but we don't, we haven't employed any consultants or anything. So you need, and I think that is absolutely important.
You've done an amazing job, as I see you everywhere.
Thank you. Yes. It's,
well, listen, Polly, I'm going to have to cut this now. We've been here for an hour, but I want to thank everybody who is our listeners. Remember, the podcast is not politically aligned with any party, but we do like interviewing candidates that are making a difference out in their own communities, running for certain things, and taking a stance. And Polly, you certainly are one of those individuals that has taken a stance and grabbed the bull by the horns and moving forward. So we want to thank you for being our guest today. And again, people, she's running as a Republican candidate for the State of Representatives District 126. And I urge you to get out and find information on her campaign and how you can donate to her. And, we'll wish you the very best, Polly, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been incredible. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.